Today's number is 134 billion, as in $134 billion. That's the maximum amount Elon Musk is seeking from OpenAI in the case that begins jury selection this morning in federal court in Oakland, California. Now, a couple of important caveats worth saying out loud here before we get going. The first is the verdict is advisory. The judge gets the final call in this case. And the case has been narrowed down from 26 claims Musk originally filed down to two. So 134 billion is the asking price, two claims, and it gets started this morning. Hang on to that number for a moment. We'll come back to it momentarily. Well, it's Monday. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. If you plan on opening Chat GPT this morning, I'm sure a lot of you are, you're using a tool whose parent company is in court today, defending whether it gets to be a normal company at all. The model running that tool, well, it shipped 4 days ago. The compute keeping it alive, it came in part from killing a different OpenAI product that officially shut down yesterday. And the engineers who built the company you're using right now, well, Microsoft, their biggest partner, just offered some of its own people a check to leave. For 6 weeks on the show, we've been previewing pieces of this morning's case. Today, the receipts have arrived. A courtroom, a new model in the wild, a buyout program, a $40 billion check, a state house, a shutdown. Today is the day the AI conversation stops being a forecast and becomes part of today's ledger. I'm Tom Michalik, and this is your morning intelligence for Monday, April 27th, 2026. Here's what we got for you today. In the lead, we have the Musk versus OpenAI trial. That begins jury selection this morning in Oakland, California. On Friday, the case got narrower from 26 original claims down to just two. And that change does matter. We'll talk about it here momentarily. In the rundown, GPT 5.5, the model that OpenAI calls SMUD, is now had its first full weekend in the wild. Less hallucinations, a new thinking model designed for actual work, and an API price that had doubled. Then, Microsoft just offered the first ever voluntary buyout in its 51-year history. And we've now crossed 90,000 tech work layoffs for the year, with the CEO of OpenAI himself admitting that some of those cuts are, quote, AI washing. And Google has put up $40 billion behind Anthropic, days after Amazon committed up to $25 billion. Combined, more than $65 billion in total. The biggest backers on earth just placed a bet on Claude. And then in today's deep cut, while everyone's been watching Washington, 3 states just quietly banned AI from being the only thing standing between you and a covered medical procedure and medication. We'll walk through the most important AI regulation story almost nobody else is covering. And we'll close with the AI product that quietly died yesterday, 15 months from launch to grave. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, let's start with today's lead story. Around 8 o'clock Pacific this morning, jury selection begins in the Musk versus OpenAI trial in federal court in Oakland, California, in front of U.S. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers. 9 jurors, no alternatives. Opening arguments are expected tomorrow. The trial is expected to run through late May. If you've been listening to this show for the last 6 weeks, you already know the broad strokes of this. We ran the primer back in April 20, I think it was the 22nd. Yeah, if you go back to April 22nd, you should be able to cover the primer. And today is the payoff for that episode. So let me focus on what's actually new since that last episode. 3 things changed since late last week. The first, on Friday, Judge Gonzalez Rogers approved Musk's request to streamline the case. Of the 26 claims he originally filed, only 2 are going to trial. They are unjust enrichment and breach of charitable trust. The fraud claims are all gone. Number 2, Elon Musk also dropped his request for personal damages. Any award now goes to OpenAI's nonprofit arm. What he is still seeking as relief is this: the removal of Sam Altman as CEO, the unwinding of OpenAI's non-for-profit for-profit conversion, a court order forcing OpenAI to maintain its nonprofit structure, and his expert team has floated up to $134 billion in damages, number from the top of the show. Number 3, and this is the structural one for this case, the trial has been split into 2 phases. There's a liability phase where the jury hands the judge an advisory verdict. And then there's a separate remedies phase decided entirely by Judge Gonzalez Rogers herself. So even if the jury sides with Musk, the actual remedies, whether Altman gets removed, whether the for profit conversion gets unwound, those are at the judge's call, not the jury's. And one piece of evidence reportedly in the filing here, a private diary entry from OpenAI co founder Greg Brockman, written in 2017, that reportedly characterizes OpenAI's nonprofit structure as, quote, a lie. That's reporting from CNBC and The Ringer. If that quote gets read aloud during the opening arguments tomorrow, it's a soundbite for the trial for days and weeks to come. So, why does this matter? ChatGPT has roughly 900 million weekly active users. If you're listening to the show, there's a very good chance you're a part of that. The trial that starts today is in plain English about whether the company that runs ChatGPT gets to keep its CEO, keep its for profit structure, and keep moving towards that IPO that's been on the books since earlier this year. Even if Musk loses, hear me on this, even if he loses, this trial is going to put internal OpenAI documents and testimony into the public record, including that Brockman diary entry. That alone reshapes how every executive, journalist, and competitor talks about the company for the next year to come. So, the rhetorical question I want to leave you with is this: if the company that runs the AI tool you open today is the defendant in a federal courtroom, a courtroom that could change its CEO, its structure, and its ownership, what does that tell you about the foundation underneath the work you do? Something to think about. So, the bottom line of all of this, if your team runs anything important on ChatGPT, build a mental backup plan this week, if for nothing else, not next month, this week. Pick which AI tool you'd rather switch to, whether Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, or a host of other tools you could possibly pick before you have to. The trial doesn't have to end against OpenAI for the tool's behavior, branding, or pricing to even shift. The point isn't to instill panic here. The point is to open optionality and keep an eye on what's going on in the courtroom as it relates to OpenAI. And while OpenAI defends its structure in court today, the model running ChatGPT just had its first full weekend in the wild. So let's go ahead and get into that in today's rundown. Last week, OpenAI shipped GPT 5.5. The internal code name was Spud. We've covered that before in past episodes. It rolled out in three variants: Standard, Thinking, and Pro, to Plus, Pro, and Business and Enterprise subscribers. API access went live the very next day. Today, Monday, is the first full business day with the model widely deployed. Three things you should probably know about. The first being OpenAI claims 60% fewer hallucinations than the previous model, GPT 5.4. That is OpenAI's number, not a third party's number, but if it holds up in your workflow, it's probably the single most useful change in the upgrade today. Fewer confidently wrong answers in your output means you can be more confident in what you put in front of other people. Number two, the thinking mode is rather new. It's designed for the kind of multi step task for most professionals to do actual work, plan a workflow, execute it, and check it against its own output. If you've been using ChatGPT as a search bar with personality, well, this upgrade is what's going to ask you to use it a little bit differently. Three, the API price doubled: $5 for a million input tokens, 30 for a million output tokens, up from 2050 to 15 in GPT 5.4. OpenAI says the effective increase is around 20% because of token efficiency gains. Developers and enterprise buyers over the weekend are not buying that math. If your company pays for the API, your finance team is about to see a huge number. So, what? Well, if you use ChatGPT at work, this is the model running your conversations starting today. Open it this morning and give it a real task, not a question, an actual task. Analyze a spreadsheet and write a summary for my boss needs. Who knows? That is what GPT 5.5 was built for. I want to see if it actually delivers. And while the model that runs ChatGPT got a little bit more expensive this week, a backer that runs it also is rethinking how it pays its own people. Microsoft, the company that put Copilot in most of your desktops, just offered for the first time in its 51-year history a voluntary buyout program. The eligibility formula is rather simple: your age plus your years of service at Microsoft. If that number adds up to 70 or higher and you're at senior director level or below, you're eligible. The program covers up to 8,750 employees, roughly 7% of Microsoft's US staff. Eligible employees and their managers receive details on May 7th. Tom's Hardware ran the year to date aggregate and it crossed a threshold. More than 90,000 tech workers laid off in 2026 so far, 155 separate layoff events. That works out to roughly 866 job losses per day. And 47.9% of those cuts, nearly half, are being directly attributed to AI and workflow automation. That is the highest AI attribution rate in any year on record. Three, and this is the editorial pivot from this morning, but Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has now publicly acknowledged what is being called AI washing. Companies are blaming AI for layoffs that frankly would have happened regardless. The CEO of the company that builds the tools is the one naming the pattern. That gives you, the listener, permission to hold both things at once. Some jobs are genuinely being replaced by AI, and some companies are using AI as a cover for restructuring they were going to do anyways. So sit with this for a couple seconds here. Let's just play this out. Let's play out the Microsoft game in our head. Take your age, add the number of years you've been at your own current company. What's the answer? And here's maybe a little bit of a harder question. If it's a Microsoft style program that landed in your inbox next Monday, what would you do with the rest of the year? That isn't a doomsday question per se. It's more of a maybe plan ahead question. And the message from corporate America this week is the same on either side of it: fewer people, more AI. So the idea here is to plan accordingly, not panic, but plan. All right. Story number three in today's rundown. And last Thursday, Google committed up to $40 billion to Anthropic, the company that makes Claude. 10 billion in cash immediately, up to 30 billion more contingent on performance. The deal values Anthropic at $350 billion. And Google Cloud will deliver 5 gigawatts of compute over the next 5 years for this effort. That announcement landed days after Amazon committed up to $25 billion more this April, a tranche on top of an existing $33 billion relationship. So if you add it all up, combined big tech backing of Anthropic is now north of $65 billion. Some context here because that size does matter. Anthropic's annualized revenue at the end of 2025 was around $9 billion. By March of this year, it had crossed $30 billion. The company is targeting an IPO in October. So what? Well, if your company uses Claude or it's maybe even evaluating Claude, Google and Amazon have now committed a combined $65 billion to the company behind it. That is the kind of signal procurement teams are paid to wait for. If you've been waiting for permission to invest in Claude workflows, this is your permission and this is what it looks like, if I may be so bold. And if you use a competing tool, this is the competitive pressure that is about to make every other AI tool better and probably cheaper through the rest of the year. All right, real quick here, let's take a quick pause. If today's episode is helping you walk into something this week with one extra useful thing in your head, maybe for a meeting, maybe there's something that you heard in this episode that you think would be important to bring up to your team, I would really appreciate if you help me spread the word about this episode and this podcast. Please share this episode with one person today. Just one, that's all I'm asking. Text message, email, LinkedIn DM, Slack message, Teams message, whatever it may be, whatever's easiest for you. If you help the show grow, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and get into today's deep cut. If you wanted a single sentence that captures how messy AI regulation actually is in this country right now, here it is. This past Thursday, the law firm Cooley published a comprehensive tracker of the US state AI laws being rewritten in real time. And reading it tells you something useful. Most of the state AI laws that were supposed to take effect this year are not the laws that are actually going to take effect this year. Three big ones, I'll take you through a quick tour. New York's RAISE Act, the state's flagship AI law, was amended on March 27th. It shifted from a strict deployment restriction framework to a transparency framework, less about telling companies what they can't deploy, more about requiring them to disclose what they do employ. Colorado's SB 205, which was supposed to take effect on June 13th of this year, is now being reconsidered. A March working group draft would repeal it entirely and reenact a different version with a new effective date in January 2027. The state pushed pause on its own deadline. And then California's AI Transparency Act, also known as SB 942, takes effect August 2nd of this year. It requires watermarks on AI generated content plus detection tools for it. That one is actually arriving on schedule. Then layer the federal angle on top of this. On March 20th, the White House published a national AI policy framework, buried it in a push for Congress to reamp the state AI laws that impose, quote, undue burdens. Translation: a federal AI law would override what New York, Colorado, and California are doing at this moment, even if those state laws are already on the books. And one more thing here, because this is the piece that lands directly in all of our lives. Three states this year, Indiana, Utah, and Washington, have passed laws banning health insurance companies from using AI as a sole basis for denying claims. The states are not banning AI from the process, they are banning AI from being the only thing in the room when making decisions about your healthcare. There has to be a human in the loop for the decision to be made in order to pass muster in those three states. So, for most of the AI conversation this year, regulation has been a story about California, Brussels, and a couple of think tanks. Until you hear that an algorithm denied a friend a coverage decision, or you read a denial letter that has phrases that don't sound like they came from an actual person. Suddenly, it stops being a regulation story and starts being a kitchen table story. So, here's another rhetorical question for your drive today, or maybe while you're listening to this at work. Has a health insurance claim ever been denied for you, for someone else you know? And do you know whether a person or an algorithm made that call? And if it was an algorithm, would you have wanted to know? This isn't necessarily hypothetical for a lot of people here. The denial of care by AI, automated systems, PA software is one of the most litigated, most investigated parts of US healthcare right now. Indiana, Utah, and Washington are now saying, well, an algorithm cannot be the only thing in the room when that decision happens. There has to be a person in the loop. This is also where the federal versus state collision also lives. If Congress eventually passes the federal AI law that preempts state laws on grounds of undue burden, every one of those state insurance protections and the dozens like them being drafted in state legislatures across the country right now could get wiped out in a single bill. The fight over which government writes the rules is the fight over how many humans review what is actually going on in your healthcare. So, the takeaway here, two practical things to take away from the story. One, if you or someone close to you has had a health insurance claim denied in the last 12 months, maybe dig up the denial letter. If you live in Indiana, Utah, or Washington, the rules under that letter just changed. You may have some new appeals rights. Who knows? I'm not a lawyer, but maybe it's worth taking a look at. Check your state's Department of Insurance website. Two, if you manage anything at work where AI gets used to make decisions about people, whether it's hiring, scheduling, performance reviews, ask your legal team one question: which state laws apply to our deployment? If the answer is we haven't checked, well, at least you have an answer. Go check. The line I remember from today is this: the biggest fight in AI regulation right now is not OpenAI versus the FTC. It's whether your state government or your federal government gets to decide whether a person or an algorithm is the last word on your insurance claim. That fight is live this week, and almost no one else is covering it. After a Monday full of courtrooms, models, buyouts, deals, and some other things about healthcare insurance, let me leave you with the AI obituary of the week. Sora, OpenAI's AI video generator, a thing that launched roughly 15 months ago to massive hype, the thing that was supposed to let anyone make professional videos with a text prompt, the thing that at its peak was reportedly burning around $1 million per day on compute costs. Well, Sora's web and app experience officially shut down yesterday. The API follows on September 24th. If you didn't export your content before yesterday, well, sorry, it's gone. Disney's licensing partnership, the ones that let you put Disney characters inside of Sora, that's also over too. Where did the compute go? Well, mostly to the model running ChatGPT this morning, the same spud we just talked about in the rundown today. So the AI video generator that opened OpenAI's product ambitions for the year, well, it got killed so they could build something better. So here's a question for you regarding Sora, and it really has less to do with Sora and more about you're just using one tool here. How much of your week, your work, or your output actually depends on a tool that one corporate decision could shut down by Friday? Two practical things here, and we're out. One, if you or your team had Sora content, today is the day to check whether you exported it before yesterday's shutdown. And two, every AI tool you use is one business decision away from being retired. Don't build your entire workflow on a single vendor. Spread the bets. That's the best advice I can give you today. All right, for tomorrow, here's some teasers. Day one of the Musk versus OpenAI trials. We have open arguments. Whether the Brockman diary makes it into the record in front of the jury, we'll wait and see. Whether the witness list shifts, again, we'll wait and see. And what, if anything, from inside OpenAI's 2017 filing cabinet gets read aloud in the federal courtroom in Oakland. Tomorrow's show is live and we'll have the readout. That's Morning Intelligence for Monday, April 27th, 2026. If you liked what you heard, give us a subscribe, give us a follow, and make sure to tune in tomorrow. And if you have any friends who are asking you, hey, what's going on in the world of AI? Go ahead and share this episode with them. You know who they are. I'm Don Michalik. Thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your Monday.